Hello everyone, my name is Tabby, and in this edition of Cell Cousin, I want to talk about the potential of art. Art is not only pretty, pretentious self-indulgence. It can be, but it can also be lulling, rejuvenating, provoking, and inspiring. Art can be a language, realizing the abstract, enabling you to engage with different perspectives. But most importantly, art can be a different type of connection, understood and felt. Today, I want to demonstrate one example of that connection through looking at one painting in particular, Susanna and the Elders by Rembrandt.
Susanna and the Elders is a story from the Old Testament book of Daniel that can be found in Roman Catholic and Orthodox versions of the Bible. Susanna, so the story goes, was a young, beautiful and faithful woman, the wife of a very rich, influential and kind man named Joachim. Joachim had a very large house with a vast and fertile garden. Many people would come to visit. One hot summer day, once all the visitors had left, Susanna wanted to take a bath in the waters of the garden. She sent away her maids to close the garden's doors, ensuring no one could enter, and started unclothing. What Susanna hadn't anticipated was that two elders, visitors from earlier, had hidden behind some bushes and were spying on her. Once the maids left, the elders came out of their hiding and confronted Susanna with two options.
She could either lay with them, which is basically Bible code for having sex. Or they would publicly accuse her of having laid with another younger man. And this would have meant the death sentence for Susanna, as she would have cheated on her husband. So it's either sex with the elders or death. Two suboptimal options.
A devout and faithful Christian, Susanna chose against sinning in the sight of the Lord, left her purity intact and got sentenced to death. But then a heroic Daniel comes in to save the day. He questions the elders individually under which tree this is said to have happened, and when they mention different types of trees, Susanna's innocence is proven. Susanna leaves with her dignity and purity intact, and the elders are stoned to death.
Happy ending, you might think. But unfortunately, this is only where Susanna's story really begins. While I told you Susanna's story just now, you saw a number of different paintings from different times depicting that story in very different styles. If you paid attention, you might have already noticed some trends. For example, the color red is often worn by the elders to signify danger, love, and lust. In a lot of them, there is a white cloth representing Susanna's innocence and her purity in her chastity. And in all of them, Susanna has very different reactions to what is going on, ranging from passiveness, helplessness, to objection.
Now look at these images of two paintings of Susanna's story next to each other. Both paintings were made by male artists from different years of the Dutch Republic. If you want, pause this video, try to identify main characteristics, compare them with each other, and think about what they might mean, what the artist might have intended to communicate, and what an audience could take away from these paintings. The painting on the left is an example of Susanna's story artistically interpreted with emphasis on its biblical or religious moral value system. A silk white cloth lays neatly arranged around Susanna's lap. As the elders gesture behind her, she raises her head and eyes at the sky towards heaven, while making the Venus Pudica gesture, originally made by Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty and desire. The gesture is associated with a sexual narrative of protective fear. The flowing stream of water, the fact that she's naked but still wearing jewelry, the shimmering cloth, everything around her screams of sensuality and fertility, placing Susanna as a prized possession due to her perseverance and her strength. She says no to the elders, but is only able to do so because of her faith, which you can undoubtedly tell from her visual plea towards God in heaven. In the painting on the right, Susanna's distress becomes a bit more evident. She still has that same passive look on her face, but this time is clearly leaning away from the elders, using stronger body language to signify that she does not want to come anywhere near them. Susanna's knees are bent in an unnatural way, representing an uncomfortable, sudden movement, and she looks straight back into the eyes of the elder telling her to stay quiet. Although there are similar elements of the water, shimmering cloth, and the jewelry, this Susanna has a bit more agency because she realizes and understands what is about to happen to her. The painting depicts the action that happened in reality, Susanna declining the elders, rather than just her pondering, patiently hoping for God to save her.
You can already tell that these two paintings show very different versions of what happened. Susanna's reaction is very different, giving her more or less agency. Now, if you paid very close attention, there is something else that characterizes all of the paintings of Susanna that you have seen within this video so far.
In all of them, Susanna is visibly naked. Of course, you might think, she was undressing. But isn't it a bit odd that although there are so many different versions of this story within art, in all of these paintings, Susanna is showing body parts usually associated with a sexual connotation. But at the same time, she is supposed to be a religious symbol of purity? If chastity is valued so highly, then why is she naked?
There is one very simple answer to this question. People, and especially men, like looking at naked ladies. In that period, landscapes were the most popular motif within painting, and nudes, especially female, were very rare. Susanna's story presented a prime opportunity to continuously lust over a naked woman, in the name of the Lord. Men would hang up these paintings in their houses, and their wives could say nothing against it. Susanna presented a unique opportunity of visualizing the eternal struggle between chastity and lust, portraying a naked woman while protecting her innocence and purity. As a result, instead of being a story centered around justice or morality, it becomes about ownership and Susanna's husband's rights to her purity over the wants of the elders. This becomes especially evident as within art history there are countless depictions of a naked Susanna next to the elders, and only very few depictions of the elders receiving their punishment, getting stoned to death. And because the culprits of this story are so clearly the elders, the viewer of these paintings, that is you, doesn't need to feel any sort of shame or embarrassment for lusting over Susanna's exposed body. Now, that is where Rembrandt comes into play.
Take some time to look at this painting. This is Rembrandt's version of Susanna from 1647. Can you feel the difference? Susanna's body language shows her clear distress, trying to step away from the elders and covering as much of her body as possible. However, as opposed to most other depictions, she actually succeeds in doing so. The delicate nature of her jewelry, barely visible, doesn't demand much attention. What does demand attention is the fiercely red clothing on the right, standing out against the earth tones of the rest of the image. The bright tone of the red, combined with Susanna's clear and comfort, take away all ambiguity about the meaning of the color. It signifies an increased sense of danger, not love or passion, as you could interpret the color red to mean within other paintings of Susanna. The elders do not play a substantial role within the composition of the image. They almost merge with the dark and gloomy atmosphere of the background. Susanna, however, very visibly stands out, implying the focus of the narrative to be on her. Susanna looks directly at the viewer, not to God or the elders. She is looking at you. She realizes the painting's viewer as the intruder and the main culprit. In the use of Susanna's story within art, the viewer takes on the literal position of the elders, spying on her naked body for sexual pleasure. This Susanna knows what her story has turned into and how it has been misused within art history. Reading the title, knowing that the painting depicts the story of Susanna and the elders, with an awareness of how this story is usually shown, the viewer would be expecting to see her naked body and experience sexual pleasure from it. But here, the viewer is caught by surprise in this Susanna's gaze, transforming the act of looking at this painting into a forbidden act. It's almost as if this Susanna is accusing the viewer. I know what you did to me and my story.
In his painting, Rembrandt not only depicts a very beautiful and touching version of Susanna, he places her and the visualization of her story into wider cultural and societal developments. Her direct gaze forces the viewer to confront the moral discrepancy between the pure nature of what she is supposed to represent versus the sexual motivation behind her portrayal. The reason why I was so fascinated with this example is because it forces you to think about how you perceive the artwork. It breaks the fourth wall and comments on the dynamic relationship between viewer and art. With this example, I didn't just want to showcase the power of this painting's background story, but the potential of how art can communicate. Unlike, for example, a policy piece, art chooses to discuss or critique an issue through feeling, and therefore it has a much greater and deeper potential to reach, connect, and interact with people. And that is what we are interested in at Sarkozy. Stay tuned for what's to come.